Welcome to African Catholic Voices, a podcast service of the Pan-African Catholic Theology and Pastoral Network. My name is Father Stan Ilo.
My name is Sister Chantal. We are your hosts today.
African Catholic Voices is a forum bringing to you the voices of African Catholics. We share with you the latest news in the Church in Africa and analysis of the mission of the Church in Africa and the daily experiences of African Christians in their enthusiastic faith and witness to the gospel.
Today we invite you, dear brothers and sisters, to say a special prayer for the Synod on Synodality as it comes to an end this week. The Synodal Assembly has decided to send a letter to the Pope, to the people of God at the end of this first session. This will give us a general understanding of the synodal deliberations and what the Spirit is saying to the Church at this time through this synod. Many Catholics and the rest of the world are waiting for this important message. Today, we want to answer the question, can the synod change Catholic doctrine? Before the synod, at the beginning, there were some heated discussions. Even some cardinals sent some questions to the Pope about aspects of the Catholic doctrine, wondering if the synod might change them. Today, we want to educate our brothers and sisters about the synod, what to expect and what not to expect from it. Father Stan, what are your thoughts really about where things are?
Well, thank you very much, Sister Chantal. I like to make 3 points. First, there is no other church really like the Catholic Church. No other church does things like we do. And I'm not trying to be triumphalistic here to say, oh, well, everything is perfect. We are the best. No, I'm just looking at what we are seeing. What do I see? I see a church gathered as one family. We have our differences, but we have a central authority, the Pope, bringing all the bishops. So you see the cohesion, you see the communication, you see the capacity of this largest religious institution on earth that is capable to harmonize differences in this way. So let us thank God for the gift of our church. Let us thank God for the gift of unity in the church. The other point is that the Catholic Church is, if you like, the only church still standing. We have had very harsh headwinds coming from currents of secularism, materialism, all forms of ideologies. There are many people who want the church and religious institutions like ours to become a guinea pig for trying out all kinds of social experiments. And so for a church like the Catholic Church, standing for objective truth, standing for an objective moral order, standing for a strong moral authority, that there is a standard that we must attain, that we shouldn't use our own spiritual weaknesses or our own cultural limitations as the criteria for defining moral truth. The church faces a lot of attacks, because there are some people who are uncomfortable, like St. Paul said, in his letter to the Thessalonians. He said that there will be a time when people will no longer be content with objective truth. They will gather around themselves people who will tell them what they want to hear. He said, preach the gospel in season and out of season. So you get all these labels being thrown around. Even sometimes they say, oh, Africans, you are very conservative and you are very this or that. But this is the beauty of our faith. And I'm really happy to see that the church has come together in this way. to dialogue, to pray, to listen to one another, to listen to the Holy Spirit. And as we come to the end of the synod, I think that the words of St. Augustine, some attribute these words to John Wesley. It was used in 1959 by Pope John the 23rd in the document Ad Petri Cathedram. St. Augustine says, in necessariis unitas, in non necessariis libertas, in utrusque caritas, in essential things, unity, in non-essential things, liberty, and in all things, charity. I think that the synod and the continuing conversation will reveal to us what those essential things are, even more. And those are the revealed truth, the things that make us a church, the things that make us a people of God, the things that God has confided in the church that we must hold on to uncontaminated and hand it on to the next generation as a deposit, a treasure that is of inestimable value, that is not our own making, but a gift from God. Then there are things that are non-essentials that relate to our human temporality, to the contingencies of histories and cultures. These are changeable realities. That is the distinction that theologians make between fides qua fides square. What we believe in, that we receive from God, and how we believe it, that is structured by our human temporality and contingency. And then in all things, we have to be charitable and listen to one another. But I must say, Sister Chantal, that it's always the moments like this make me feel very proud to be a Catholic, that like von Balthasar says, that the Catholic Church has something that no other church has. We have a center of authority, a center of unity, a center of love. And we see that center where all Catholics are converging through their representatives. And I hope we converge greater, a movement towards unity. The world today needs that unity. And in a divided world, it's wonderful to see such a unity displayed, at least by the whole Catholic world. I mean, there are divisions, for sure. That's what makes us human. But Sister Chantal, what has really touched you about the Catholic Church as you watch the ongoing Synod on Synodality?
Thank you, Father Stan. What actually touched me in this process is the idea of the Synod of Synodality. That is some sort of bringing to the surface of what the Catholic Church is. The Catholic Church is communion, everybody together. And this Synod of Synodality is another way of reminding to the Christians that the Catholic Church is not pyramidal. It is secular. It is everybody that is in it. So the Pope Francis has wanted every Christian to participate, to say what he thinks on what you said on the essential unity and the non-essential and the charity. He has wanted every Christian to say something in this process of synodality. It is a process of communion, a process for participation, a process of mission. We are journeying towards our Creator, and I really like it. It's actually a pedagogy that He has introduced us in it, and I really think this Synod of Synodality is not going to end at the end of 2024, but the church will continue in this process of listening, discerning together what is the will of God in us. I really appreciate it, and I thank God for this initiative. You are listening to the Africa Catholic Voices, a podcast service of the Pan-African Catholic Theology and Pastoral Network. My name is Sister Chantal, and I'm here today with Father Stan. So we come to the final part of our discussion, and I will ask you directly, Father Stan, because you are an African theologian and an ecclesiologist. Can a synod change Catholic doctrine?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, but I think we need to make that clarification, in terms of doctrine and dogma, that there are truths that are defined, and these truths, that's why what a council does, a council like the Council of Nicaea, it defines a doctrine, and that's how the creed emerged. So the answer is no. The Synod is not meant to change Catholic doctrine, particularly the Synod of Bishops in its current form, established by Pope Paul VI on 15 September 1965 in his motu proprio Apostolica Solicitudo. The aim of the Synod of the Bishops is eminently advisory for consultation and deliberation. So it only has a consultative and deliberative voice or vote. But the International Theological Commission, in its document of 2018, number 68, was also very careful to say that even though it is a deliberative and consultative, but that vote carries a lot of weight because of the collegial nature of the church. Now, if we read that motu proprio, I like to cite that because it states clearly why the Synod of Bishops exists. The Synod of Bishops, Pope Paul VI writes, has of its very nature the function of providing information and offering advice. It can also enjoy the power of making decisions when such power is conferred upon it by the Roman Pontiff. In this case, it belongs to the Roman Pontiff to ratify the decision of the Synod. Even in those decisions that the Synod can make, there is a difference between deliberative and consultative decisions. So Pope Francis, in his own document released on the 15th of September 2018 on the Synod of Bishops, titled Episcopalis Communio, number 7, was clear. The fact that the Synod ordinarily has only a consultative role does not diminish its importance. In the Church, the purpose of any collegial body, whether consultative or deliberative, is always the search for truth or the good of the Church. When it is therefore a question involving the faith itself, the consensus ecclesiae is not determined simply by tallying votes, but in the outcome of the working of the Spirit, the soul of the one Church of Christ. So even though there is a vote, the focus here is that the decision or decisions of the Synod are meant to help the Pope and the entire Church to carry out the mission of pastoral governance of the people, the salvation of souls, and the advancement of the mission of the Church that the Church has received from the good Lord. And there has to be a distinction made here, Sister Chantal, because the question is, okay, can the Pope himself change the doctrines of the Church? The canon law gives the Pope very great power. Canon 333 and Canon number 1 and 2 says that, the Roman Pontiff, in fulfilling his office as Supreme Pontiff of the Church, is always joined in full communion with other bishops and indeed with the universal Church. He has the right, however, to determine, according to the needs of the Church, whether this office can be exercised in his person or in a collegial manner. But by virtue of his office, the Pope has universal power. He has this power over the Church. Is a great power. That's what we call papal primacy. However, the fathers of the Second Vatican Council were very clear in Lumen Gentium number 25, when it says, "But when either the Roman Pontiff or the body of bishops, together with him, defines a judgment, they pronounce it in accord with revelation itself. All are obliged to maintain and be ruled by this revelation, which, as written or preserved by tradition, is transmitted in its entirety through the legitimate succession of bishops, and especially through the care of the Roman pontiff himself. So the answer is, this current synod cannot change Catholic doctrine. That is not the mission that it has. That is not its role. And that is not consistent with the traditions of the church. So we can come to further conversations about this, but it's very important that people do not get unnecessarily anxious about, oh, will the synod change doctrine? Will they pass a vote about doctrine? No. The revelation has been given. We have received the revelation. So, and I would like to make a distinction here, because I like to use the voices of St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas to make this point. At the beginning of his very important book, the Doctrina Christiana, Augustine says that there are two ways of proceeding when you are considering the doctrine. First is the path of discovery, and then the second is the path of explanation. So the path of discovery is what we all continue to do as theologians, as is our faith-seeking understanding. You want to discover the truth that God has revealed to you, that God has revealed to the church. We're not going to invent the doctrine. So when you say, can they change doctrine? So change it into what? Are you going to create a new doctrine? No, we are to discover the doctrine according to St. Augustine. And when we have discovered the doctrine, we explain it to people. That's the pedagogy you mentioned, Sister Chantal, teaching authority of the church, pastoral authority of the church, so that they can discover what God has revealed to us. And the great Aquinas, in the prima pars of his Summa Theologica, begins that prima pars with the question, what is Sacra Doctrina? So what are we talking about here? Is the truth about God as revealed to us by God himself, which we cannot on our own know. Our unaided human reason can understand small things about God here and there, but God as God is, we cannot understand except through divine revelation. And the same thing also about human being, about salvation, about the path to God. We can, as human beings, we might understand a little, but God reveals to us who we are. We cannot know ourselves unless we know ourselves in God and through God. And that, I think, both the morals of the church, the moral teaching, the faith, these are received from God, and ours is to follow God, so that God can lead us into that truth. I'm sorry I've gone a bit longer here, but it's very important because there's been a lot of tension, as you pointed out at the beginning, between those who think the church can change everything and we can change doctrine, and those who think, oh yeah, by not changing these things, you are conservative, you are backward looking, you are not future looking. It's very important to make this distinction. I don't know what you think, Sister Chantal.
No, it's it is very, very beautiful listening to you. The greatness, the immensity of God. And thank you for sharing with us the strength, the power, the knowledge in your theological studies. And this journey you've taken us through the canon law, the revelation, the scriptures, the pastoral government of the church. All these you've articulated them within the synod and the council, and you are make us understand that the synod is also that the synod. There's a difference between the synod and the council, and that the synod can also be local, regional. Synod address pastoral problems and find pastoral approaches to respond to the old and new challenges emerging from the culture. I think that we need to have more synods, isn't it, in this our Africa continent, because we have a lot, the level of poverty, the wars, our educational system is really issue. There are cultural issues that really need a synod here in Africa to look at it, to see how God is driving us. Is God actually driving us in this poverty? Is it really the wish of God that that the African should be in this mystery, in this poverty? I think we really need a synod here in Africa for that. But I understand. What do you think?
Yeah, I will agree with you to some extent, Sister Chantal. We need synods, but I also ask, the synods that we already had, have we started implementing them? We've already had two special synods for Africa. We had 1994 and 2010, and there are very far-reaching proposals. For instance, you talk about poverty. That was at the center of the Second African Synod, the church as salt and light. It was dedicated to how can we be a light in a continent where people are in the darkness of poverty, suffering. Even the bishops of Africa said we should have one day that is called African Reconciliation Day. It's there in Afriche Munus. Have we implemented that? So I think it's good that we have more synods because, yes, it seems that by talking more about something and talking about it repeatedly, it will make people then to take notice. But I like to tell you, Sister Chantal, you know that the synodal tradition grew in Africa, in the African soil. Cyprian of Carthage is his words that continue to drive the key principle for doing synod, when he said, I have resolved never to do anything in this diocese without first consulting with my people. So when some priests asked Cyprian, the great Cyprian of Carthage in present-day Tunisia, they asked him some questions, and they thought he would give them a quick answer. He said, sorry, fathers, I have to answer in common. I mean, I need to consult the people so we can examine this thing together and decide what can be done. And, you know, he now encouraged people not to make decisions, church leaders, without first consulting the faithful in his epistles. And most of the controversies in the church in the first 500 years were resolved through this kind of synodal consultation. But synods are usually local, regional, and I know that, for instance, in Alexandria, the Synod of Alexandria in 231 through 32 was convoked in order to remove Origen, who was then the head of the Faculty of Theology at the Alexandrian Catechetical School, you know, and there are many others. So these local synods continue to be a source of inspiration. The canon law also recognizes and encourages synod in dioceses. So I think that's why this synod on synodality started with diocesan consultation.
Yeah.
Indeed, I think Pope Francis is trying to encourage us to do this. And the Pope always says in a few of the moments I have had opportunity to listen to him closely, he always say, act locally. So the answers and solutions to the problems in Africa that you mentioned will not be solved by Pope Francis. It has to be solved by us, priests, sisters, lay members of Christ's faithful, bishops. We cannot leave it in the hand of any person. And that's the momentum that is being introduced in the Catholic system now to do this. And I think that we can learn a lot from Cyprian of Africa, Augustine of Africa, Aurelius of Africa, Athanasius. These are great synodal mentors and synodal models that Africa has.
Yeah, thank you very much, Father Stan. So, in other words, you are saying that we should be looking forward for a synod in Africa to address these cultural issues of poverty, war, educational systems and values. Are they actually responding to the needs of Africa? And then maybe also a synod that will question the contents of the past synods. The deliberations, where are they? Why are they kept somewhere? Maybe those are the issues to be addressed in the upcoming African Synod. But in the synodal tradition, for example, Father Stan, in the motto proprio of Pope Paul VI, he refers to the Synod of the Bishop as the Council of Bishops. Is the Synod the same as the Council?
Yeah. Before I go to that, Sister Chantal, I like to disagree with you a little. I mean, we are co-hosting here. That doesn't mean we have to agree on everything, right?
Of course.
so you're calling for an African synod. I am calling for diocesan synods. That is, Africa is not one place. The problem in Cameroon, for instance, in southern Cameroon, is different from the problem in northern Nigeria. Is different from the issue in Somalia or in Congo or in South Sudan. And when you look at the bigger picture, you will see that the Europeans, when they're talking about the German synodal path, the Italians, the United Americans, Canada. But then when we want to talk about Africa, why do we have to say Africa together? Yes, we are together because post-colonialism, slavery, made us one in suffering, in oppression, and in the pain and tragedies that we suffer from the contradictions and complications of modernity. That is this convergence, Africa. If you embrace Western modernity, if you embrace Western type of Christianity, then you will enter into the global order, into the Catholic world. But I think this is a lie. Our problems are still our problems. There's no convergence. If I'm traveling from Nigeria, I will need a visa to enter most other countries in Africa. But even worse, it gets worse for you going into Europe or North America, right? So there's no convergence. There's no convergence. There's discrimination. There's racism. So we have our common problems as Africans, but I think the time also requires what Pope Francis says, that we act locally. So in terms of the difference between a synod and a council, you notice that sometimes it's used interchangeably. Actually, the root word of council, concilium, is the same as the Greek word for synod, synodos. So sometimes it's used interchangeably, but I can say this, and I stand to be corrected, that every council is synodal in nature, but not every synod is a council, but every council is conciliar in nature. That is, that it is about thinking together, sentire cum ecclesia. We are thinking together. We are working together. Is collegial, is communion, is participation. However, the councils, what makes councils different, especially, is it's called ecumenical councils. That means it's the whole church gathered to address specific issues. For instance, Council of Nicaea gathered to address the question of the two natures of Christ. You see what I mean? So when you think of all the councils, they always come to sometimes to address a crisis, a heretical issue that is troubling the church. So they gather to clarify the truth. So a council is by that nature, always you see, if you look at the Second Vatican Council, the 16 documents, you see decrees, constitution. So even later then it starts to make some declaration, but it's usually the dogmatic constitution. You see that, the pastoral constitution. So the council is more definitive because it relates to the core doctrines of the church. But this synod is more pastoral and more specific to particular questions. And so the Pope invites bishops or a local church, a regional church gathers to address specific problems that are more localized or that are more issue related. A council makes decree, and a council indeed and councils define doctrine. But they don't change doctrine. This must be clear. This is very, very important. And I think that when you look at three things that I think that we must know, there's a council will relate to the past, the present, and the future. The doctrine of the church is relevant to the past. It continues to the present and into the future. So you might think of verbum rememorativum, or what you call the memory of the church, and this is the memory of Jesus Christ that is rooted in the Trinity. Then if you think of verbum demonstratum, you are demonstrating the relevance of this teaching to today. And then you can think of verbum prognosticum. We are looking to the future. So the council, that's exactly what the council does. The past, the present, the future. You see the decrees, they tell you the revelation as we find in scripture, the traditions of the church, and then they show how we move into the future. So this threefold movement. But Synod tend often to say, well, there is war today. How do we address it? We are here in this diocese and we are facing challenges. How do we address it? So I think it's those the distinction. But the Pope, again, that's what they call the primatial function of the Pope. The Pope has supreme authority to convoke the council as well as to convoke the synod. So it is the Pope who actually would give it a name. So the Pope can call, okay, I'm convoking a synod, or I am convoking a council. And then we provide the people, sometimes like in the past, when the council of the Second Vatican Council met, he has to ask some questions. Is it the time now for us to do A, B, C? So, or is it the time for us to just have a synod? So, it's very important, and that goes back to the question we are addressing today. Can a synod change doctrine? No, it cannot change doctrine. It can only help us to make the doctrines intelligible. Can a council change doctrine? No, but a council can define it. That is, make it clearer, use some new language to interpret it. Like we talk about homoousios, right? Wow. Yeah. So we talk homoousios. We talk of Mary Theotokos, the mother of God. So the council can make those kinds of fundamental articles of faith. Yeah. So I think, but a synod does not have such power.
So you mean that the current synod cannot change the church's teaching on marriage, women ordination, or some of the demands made by the German synodal document, for instance?
Oh, part two is not possible. It's not possible. The synod does not have the authority to change the teaching of the church on marriage. Marriage is a sacrament in the church between a man and a woman. For this reason, the Lord says, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall be called what? One, husband and wife. The same way, the church's, the sacramental system, in terms of the matter and the form, whether it is with ordination or with marriage, is the same, the matter and the form. The church cannot change the matter and the form. The church cannot say, okay, now we start using wine to do baptism. Can it? You cannot say you cannot say okay. No, so because this is what Jesus did, and he has asked us to do what he did. And so are we smarter than Jesus who gave us this? No. He's the revelation of God. He's the manifestation of the will of God for us. And so by following him, we also reach that point where he reached union, perfect union with God. And that's why it's very important for us to continue to deepen our understanding of this verbum rememorativum, the past, the memory of what Jesus did. And in our African tradition, we're so good with that, aren't we, Sister Chantal? We are very ancestral. We always remember the words of our ancestors. We reverence them. We don't throw them away, because if we throw them away, the Sankofa, we lose our past. They say the African Sankofa, that we move forward by looking back. Some people now say, oh, let's change everything. Oh, yeah, it's modern time. No, you cannot change. And we have this social experimentation that we see today in the world. That's what has torn other churches apart, because all these so the church has become, some of the churches have become guinea pig for social experiments. So they hear, oh, there's same-sex marriage in the Canada or South Africa or Argentina or some states, they have given same-sex marriage certificate. Then some churches say, okay, now we are doing same-sex marriage. You see, and then are they driving the culture, or is the culture driving them? C.S. Lewis, one of the very important, influential English writers, said that the church that continues to copy every social experiment will become a widow. We become a widow, because then that social experiment will die. The church will then start looking for another husband.
And then at that point we should be asking what is actually the mission of the church, because to my understanding, the mission, the church should be a light to the society. But now, if it is the society that is leading the church, what is actually the mission of the church?
I like that word you talk about, mission, because we just celebrated Mission Sunday, Chantal. It's the mission of God. It is not our mission. We are here to do the Lord's will. We are ambassadors. It's not our church that we have to make what we want, but we ask ourselves, what does the Lord want of us, so that we can do it?
And then this is also as this issue of mission. It's also very important at one time to ask ourselves, what are we working? Are we doing the work of the Lord, or we are working with the Lord? So for the start, thank you very much for this enlightenment that you have given to us. Actually, you've shared with us your knowledge in theology and in ecclesiology. Thank you very much for all the enlightenment, for all the nourishment that you have given to us in our faith through this explanation of what is the Synod and the Council. You've reminded us of what is our duty in the church, and what is the duty of the church to us, or what is the church altogether. You've reminded us on what is the revelation, and then the magisterium, the canon law, the scriptures, and then you've also try. I don't want to say you try. I don't want to say you've tried. You've explained to us what is the doctrine of the church, what is coming from Jesus, And what is the church trying to do with what is coming from Jesus? The difference between the revelation and the culture. We are pilgrims, we are journeying, and then the church is trying to understand himself. What is the will of God? How is he going to articulate the culture and the revelation? And then in the journey, and in this journey, Pope Francis initiates us in this idea of the Synod of the Synodality, of journeying together, this process of listening to one another, this process of participation, the process of communion, and the process of being.
And I like to say, Sister Chantal, it's really very important, this distinction you're making, this process. How do we participate in the mission? We participate by discovering, like St. Augustine says, fides qua, what we believe in that is unchanging, because God does not change. Morality, what is good, does not change. Fides qua, how we understand the path of explanation, the interpretation, explanation, that's different. Yeah, so it's very important, this distinction you make about fides qua, because once people understand that, then your mind is set toward God, and you go beyond yourself, because the human tendency, John Paul II said that in a Veritatis Splendor, the human tendency is to make our own culture, our own sin and limitation, the criterion for truth.
Yeah.
So if I'm stealing, then I try to find how I can make stealing look good, and say, what would Jesus? We say, what would Jesus do? Maybe Jesus will accept me as a thief. After all, he accepted the good thief.
He accepted the good thief.
He accepted the good thief on the cross. So, thank you very much.
Father Stan, thank you very much for this enlightenment. Nous te disons merci beaucoup pour ce chemin que tu as fait avec nous. Tu as fait sortir les données théologiques, les données de l'écriture, du magistérium, pour nous faire comprendre la différence entre les conciles et les synodes. Et tu nous as fait comprendre qu'est-ce que ce concile peut faire et qu'est-ce qu'on ne peut pas attendre de ce concile. Et tu nous as, dans votre explication, tu nous as fait comprendre l'immensité de Dieu qui est incréé, et nous sommes des créatures, et que nous ne pouvons pas prétendre de mesurer notre capacité de créature avec ce qui est la révélation, qui est Jésus-Christ, et que nous devons chercher à comprendre comment concilier notre culture avec la révélation. Que la révélation est là. Tout ce que nous sommes en train de faire, c'est à découvrir cette beauté qui est déjà là, et découvrir quelle est la volonté de Dieu qui est là, et comment continuer à cheminer avec Dieu, et que les conciles et les synodes sont le processus, sont le moyen par lequel l'Église se comprend et l'Église se communique. Et tout cela, ça fait la beauté de l'Église catholique. L'Église catholique qui est forte, qui est unie, qui est construite sur le roc qui est Jésus-Christ, et que c'est le fondement de toutes nos réflexions. C'est de là, ça commence de là et ça va terminer là-bas. Donc, nous disons merci aussi pour cette opportunité de réfléchir sur les synodes et synodalités, ce que le synode peut faire et ce que le synode ne peut pas faire, en rendant grâce au Seigneur pour notre foi, en rendant grâce au Seigneur pour ce que nous sommes. On lui demande de donner son esprit pour être attentive aux unes des autres, à savoir communier, à savoir participer à sa mission.
Merci beaucoup, Sœur Chantal. Merci, chers frères et sœurs, de nous avoir rejoints pour cet épisode. S'il vous plaît, de continuer à prier pour le succès du synode sur la synodalité et pour les délégués africains. Nous devrions prier pour le changement de cœur en ce moment. La conversion des âmes est la conversion du monde plutôt que pour le changement dans les doctrines et les enseignements. Chers amis, jusqu'à la semaine prochaine, nous vous demandons d'être forts dans votre foi, d'être fidèles et ferventes dans l'amour des autres et d'être courageux dans l'espérance. Be strong in your faith, brothers and sisters. Be faithful in loving. Be courageous in hope. And let us take care of this beautiful church that God has given to us. Let's take care of it and hand it on to our children. Au revoir.
Au revoir. Thank you, Father.
Bye. Bye.